Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone.
Welcome to the All Paths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to try to grow your family. We are your hosts, Kate and Emily from the nonprofit organization All Paths Family Building. And today we're talking with Alison about her journey. Alison, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
Before we get into talking about your own family building journey, we'd love for you to introduce yourself for our listeners.
Sure. My name is Alison. I live in Wakefield, Massachusetts. I've lived here for probably 13 years now, and I am a second grade teacher, and I'm native to Connecticut. That's where I grew up. That's where my family is actually kind of all over the place. I have family in Connecticut, I have family in New York and California, but I've kind of made Wakefield my home.
Wonderful. So, can you tell us a bit about your journey to starting a family? Where did it all begin?
Sure. I had just turned 37, and forever I've loved children, always had a way with children. I've been told would be the one to hold my friends' babies, to get my friends' babies to fall asleep. And it had been some time where I have had friends. I had friends who were getting married, getting pregnant, having one, two, some had three children. And I was realizing that kind of my time was running out. I was, knowing at that time compared to now, I feel like I knew very little, but I did know that there was a window, and mine was probably getting close to closing at 37. So I kind of took it upon myself to reach out to a few people I knew who they both were same-sex couples. And I knew that they had used some sort of fertility. I didn't know very much, but I knew that they used some sort of fertility treatment. And I reached out to ask them questions, and they were so willing to share kind of their journeys. I didn't even know where to start. And so one had told me that she used Boston IVF, and I kind of just started Googling, and I realized that there was a Boston IVF nearby in Stoneham. And I was like, oh, that's 5 minutes from my house. And so I reached out, and I was like, yeah, all I'm going to do is kind of ask questions. So I got an informational, like a consultation appointment with them, and that's where it all took off. And I learned a ton along the way, and kind of went into it blind, but now feel like I have this wealth of knowledge about the, fertility road and end infertility, unfortunately. But I knew that I was financially capable. I've always been a good saver, budgeting my money, paying my bills on time. I had bought a condo with 2 bedrooms, and I was like, you know what? I should be a mom. I should be someone's mom. I have had it in my heart and forever. And I knew that was my destiny. I just didn't know how I was going to get there.
I love that. Well, you absolutely should be a mom, and we're so glad you are a mom. Spoiler alert, but
Right.
but we're so happy that you are, and we're going to hear more about that. And I also have to say, I feel like with the wealth of knowledge you have gathered through your own experience and more, I feel like you're so generous with sharing it, which is indicative of you being our guest today, and just a lot of the different ways that you share your own journey to help other people feel less alone doing it and more knowledgeable doing it. And it sounds like you got that from some friends too, which is really nice. It's like you're paying it forward from that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to be able to ask, and kind of just even through a text message, it's a little less risky to be like, hey, would you mind sharing? And actually anybody I talk to who has, traveled this path of fertility treatments, and everyone has, yes, like everyone is happy to talk. Everyone is happy to share. I did Facebook searches. I joined groups, and that's where I met you, Kate. I went to a tea, like an infertility that you
That was
were
so great.
hosting. And I realized none of my close friends had traveled this path. And while I love them and I'm so grateful for their support and their friendship, to me, they were in my corner 100%. No one had done what I was about to do. And so I needed to build my own network. And
Mhm.
in doing so, I now feel like I have to speak in conversations like these, and with anyone who is traveling this road, just because it could be so lonely. And I was so grateful for the support I got, and I wouldn't want anyone to feel like they have to travel this alone. So I actually found, I think it was a Facebook page of local Boston area single moms by choice. And I found a couple people and we met up and we went for a walk. And it is so comforting to find someone who not only is going through fertility, which can feel so alone, but this road of being a mom by choice, going in it alone, is even harder to find someone who gets it. And I mean, to this day, it's still, I still want to continue to build this network around me because it can feel so isolating. And there's so many feelings that go along with it that it's just nice to know that there's people who do understand and can relate.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as you know, that's just one of our core beliefs here at All Paths is that you need to find your people. And I think it's so true. I think the generosity of the community, I agree with for sure, and sometimes I'll just find out sort of not through work, but just haphazardly somehow find out that, we have fertility struggles or loss or both in common. And I always say to people like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that we have this in common," but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, like bring it in, like I'm like we are one, because it is a bond. But I think the more you can find people who understand or can relate to the specific journey of
Mm-hmm.
doing this with intention as a solo parent, and can really hear you when you make those very specific comments or
Mm-hmm.
concerns, or even I feel like we're so hard on ourselves sometimes too. So it's like you need to be able to
Yeah.
like share those things that you say only to yourself, and then have that other person be like, "Oh, I feel that way too, but we're being
Mm-hmm.
too hard on ourselves. We are actually not deserving of those self-criticisms."
Yeah. I think infertility comes with this, host of self criticisms that are unique to the infertility world. But also, I feel like as a solo parent, I brought some more right on my shoulders. I have somewhere in my mind, which I knew kind of going in. I did a lot of work in therapy before, while I was trying, when I was just thinking of it, when it was just a glimmer in my mind. And then while I was going through, trying to get pregnant, while I was pregnant, and then ever since. This idea of, because I chose to go at this alone, does the world view it as like, well, you can't complain because you're the one who wanted to do this by yourself, Allison? And I have this hat on that says I have to do it all. And I have to be my son's mom and other parental figure, if there were to be two of us. And I have to be wearing so many hats at so many times. And I have to do this because this is what I signed up for. It's just, that's the kind of like nagging thing that's going to be in the back of my mind, no matter. I'm still working at it. I think it'll just always be there because of the nature of this journey that I chose to do on my own. But it's one of the hardest, I think, battles I have in my own head, is that I feel like I have to do it all. And so thankfully, I have a therapist who's like, no, if you had a partner, you would still be going through this. No, if you had a partner, it would still feel like this. So thankfully, I have them because it's hard. I'm surrounded by people who are married and who are raising their child or children with a partner. And, they can complain about things that I am like, well, thank God I don't have to deal with that. But I also am like, well, stop complaining. You can't walk out your door when your kid has a fever at 2 o'clock in the morning and go to CVS. that makes me mad. Like, I can't do that. But with most of it's in my head. I have a plenty of people who, if I would just, and when I do reach out, are willing to help me.
I think most people can relate on some level to that
Yeah.
critical voice in your head, but I'm so glad that you've found your community. You've built it through, when you were trying all the way to now being a parent to
Mhm.
kind of help counteract or shout out that voice sometimes when necessary.
Yeah.
So I feel like we might have skipped a couple of steps. So what happened after you did that initial consult with the clinic and said, okay, I've made the decision, gotta, start this process. Then what happened?
Okay. So at my consultation, she kind of worked with me on, as a solo parent, I would have to do a whole bunch of research on a sperm donor while at the same time choosing the route of IUI or the route of IVF. And for me, as a teacher, I have wonderful insurance. But as a solo person doing this alone, I would have to go the route of IUI. And the way insurance is that I would have to try and fail at IUI 6 times before they would cover IVF. Cost of sperm would not be covered because I don't have a partner. I don't have someone who has like a poor sperm count or anything. So I was paying for sperm out of pocket, which I think in the end ended up being one of the most expensive things there is. And I didn't know the first thing about you can buy a vial for IUI, you can buy an ICSI vial, you can buy it was so much that I was like, I have no idea what this means. Then it was kind of the daunting road of like, oh my God, I have to find a sperm donor. And finding a sperm donor is like the ultimate kind of online shopping because there's so many categories to kind of filter. You can kind of set your filters and you can search for absolutely anything, which is amazing, but also overwhelming. The basics like hair color, eye color, height, ethnicity. But then you could go into individual profiles and you can see kind of their personal physical health and mental health, but you can see their extended family through aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. Like you could just go down a rabbit hole. So I kind of had it in my mind that I wanted a child who obviously looked like me. I the worry I had early on was like, oh, I'm gonna get a child what if I have a child who's super, super pale and has bright red hair, or something just not anything like me. So I, started off by doing, brown hair, brown eyes, and then, kind of reading personalities of donors. I wanted someone who seemed to describe themselves as being calm and things that I wouldn't necessarily say I was all the time. I wanted kind of like an easygoing personality to try to maybe balance. I don't know. I think you could just go crazy kind of figuring it out. And I did ask some friends to help me who are more than happy to kind of look through these profiles. And you see baby pictures of the donors. And I wanted someone with kind of an ethnic background that was similar to mine. Um, and then in the end, actually, over the course of time, I think I used maybe 2 or 3 donors because what I didn't realize was how many, you know, tries at having a baby I was going to actually have to have. So I did all the initial testing, everything pointed to that I would have no issues whatsoever getting pregnant. Everything hormonally was fine. Everything kind of like internally, follicles and all of those things were fine. There was nothing on paper that was going to get in my way. I was told early on that like each round of IUI, I could have a lot of extra like monitoring appointments if I wanted. I could have extra blood work and ultrasounds. But according to the doctor I was working with, there was no reason why I shouldn't be successful sooner than later. And it took, well, there was a chemical pregnancy in there somewhere, maybe around the third or fourth IUI. The sixth IUI resulted in a pregnancy. And that I was not expecting, because after like 5 failed ones, I was like, wait, what? Everything was going great. They had me come in at a 6-week ultrasound. I saw the heartbeat. The doctor said, everything looks great. Your numbers look great. The ultrasound looks great. You can come in for an ultrasound at 8 weeks, or we can discharge you to an OB. So at that time, I was like, you know what? No, I would like to come in for the 8-week ultrasound, just for like the peace of mind, because an OB wasn't going to see me till after 10 weeks anyway. I did have a friend who was going with me to the ultrasounds at that time, went to the first one with me. And so this 8-week ultrasound, I was like, you know what? You don't have to come. Everything's great. We already saw the heartbeat. Everything was wonderful. And like, this is just like that movie where you see the, like, don't do it now in hindsight. Cause it was the Friday. I'll never forget it. It was the Friday before Veterans Day weekend. And I was going right before work, like a early 6:30 in the morning ultrasound, because I was going to go right to work after and then drive to New York to stay with my sister for the long weekend. And it was that dreaded, like, ultrasound tech was silent. And it was just a bunch of clicking. And I was like, what's happening? And she said she couldn't see a heartbeat. And so I just laid there. And then, had to call work and say, I can't come there. And I think I just got in the car, and I think I ended up just driving to my sister's house anyway, because I didn't know what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I had to call people and say, there's no heartbeat. And everyone, just like me, was like, what? What do you mean there's no heartbeat? Like, it went from this glowing, everything's perfect, everything's great. At that time, no one I knew, I should say no one I consciously knew of had
Right.
ever had a miscarriage before. I had no idea. I was alone, cried in my car the whole drive. I didn't know what to do. So I'm glad I was going somewhere and not just coming home alone. Since then, I can't say that was the hardest miscarriage I had, because every miscarriage was hard, but that's the one I still think about. And I know people, there's this theory of thought that, like, your body holds on to memories like that, especially one like of a miscarriage. And it's ironic, because around that Veterans Day weekend every year, I like I find it, I recognize it in my, which I can later realize is like in my body, this mourning that my body has, or mentally I'm feeling kind of out of it. And I'm like, what's going on with me? And I'm like, oh, it's that weekend. It's this weird, weird thing that I've kind of stumbled upon, that, like, if it's just, I don't know if it's mental or physical or what, but it's your body remembering. So that was IUI number 6. And so after that, I didn't know what to do. The pregnancy was gone, but do I wait? Do I let it work itself out naturally? Do I take a medication? Do I go in for a DNC? I had no idea what any of those things were and what any of that meant. And I was in so much grief that I opted for the DNC, because I couldn't walk around one more minute of one more day, knowing that, like, this thing that I waited for and like wanted with my whole heart was not living inside my body. I took a couple days off of work, which in hindsight, my gosh, I should have taken more. I tried to go right back to work. And I know it's slowly coming, but there's no support for women who have gone through a pregnancy loss. There should be a grieving time. It's a loss, right? And you have bereavement days for the death of a loved one. And I don't still understand. And I know that, Kate, you're doing a lot of work with this. Like, it is so important to me that
Mm-hmm.
that's validated for the people who have gone through it. Like, yep, it's a loss, and it's you have to grieve, and you cannot just jump right back into life like everything's okay. I tried to do as much digging as I could with follow-up appointments with the doctors. Like, what is it? What's wrong? Because then you go down this road of what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? You told me my body was just fine. You told me on paper that I should not have any trouble. You told me that there was a heart that was beating and that everything measured okay. And once you get a beating heartbeat, it's like you're good. You just go down this road and everything will be fine. And that was the hardest part of all, like this slap in the face, this reality check of like, nope, just kidding. You thought you were okay and you're not. I think I tried to have testing run. They couldn't find anything. They couldn't find any reason. And I hated that. And it's such a common theme, with this whole process is that I needed them to just tell me why, and nobody could. I needed the reason. I needed to know what I should have done or should not have done. And nobody could. And they're like, sometimes these things just happen. And I was like, that's not good enough for me. That's not a good enough reason, because I saw it with my own eyes.
Right. And so many people hear that, like, oh, we can't find a reason. Be like, it must have been something that I did. I caused this somehow. They just haven't figured out what I did to screw up yet. And that's weighs so heavily on you.
You just go down these rabbit holes of like, well, I probably should have lost 20 pounds, or, well, I probably shouldn't have eaten those things. Or maybe if I exercised 4 more days a week instead of, 4 days a week instead of 3 days a week, then this wouldn't have happened. And I didn't always have, I mean, again, this is putting my therapist hat on. Like, it doesn't mean it would have been better if someone was in the house with you 24/7, Allison, but I want to be able to talk about it all the time. I wanted to keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it to try to make sense of it. But I mean, I could, but I also couldn't. So it just kind of sat in my brain and just kept spinning and spinning and spinning, because I, yes, could talk about it in therapy, but I know with people who haven't lived it, I feel like I'm maybe beating a dead horse in their eyes, right? Like, okay, it's been time. You can move on from now. But as a solo parent, or pursuing solo parenthood, like, I couldn't, and this is what made me angry. Like, I can't just try. Just try again. Just try again. Because you know how much money it costs me to just try again? Like, I think that's the part that I felt like wasn't fair in my specific instance. Like, I couldn't just wait for my next period and my partner and I would try again. I couldn't just go back to fertility treatments without spending thousands of dollars on sperm again. So there's a part of me that was angry. It was angry at the people who could just try again. And I feel bad for saying that in some way for people who are struggling with their infertility, and I do understand, like, the road to trying is not always a choice one, and it has its own problems in and of itself. But I think when I start to feel down on myself is when I start to say, this isn't fair. Why do I have to do this alone? And when the bad times came, I certainly would go to that place. Like, why me? Like, what's wrong with me that I can't find a partner to do this with? Right. Um, and so that, thank goodness for therapy. I'll say it a million times. And thank goodness for the few friends that I could just, like, unravel and just cry my eyes out to and say the same thing again. And, I don't really know what the right answer is to someone like me, but I'm stubborn enough that I wasn't going to stop. And initially, going back to the drawing board and having completed 6 IUIs, it meant that I could start IVF. And in some ways, my, like, type A teacher personality, like, dove right into IVF. I loved the, like, script. I loved the schedule. I loved being in charge of my own shots. Like, I just was like, yes, I'm all in for this. Just give me the directions and I will be the perfect student. I will follow all the rules. I had a really close friend who she and her husband were going through IVF, and the timeline kind of matched up to me starting IVF. And so she had done her injections, shortly before me. And so she came over, and I watched countless YouTube videos, but I was going to do it. And she stayed with me the first day, but then from then on out, I was like, oh, I can do this. This is easy. Like this, I have control over. Like finally, I can control something, which in the IUI process, I had none. And so this felt good because I did get some sense of control. Money came into being, a factor. Like I couldn't, if I wanted to do ICSI fertilization as a solo person, insurance would not cover it. So because I had 6 failed IUIs, it wasn't enough. And one time along the line, I did with my insurance,
You appealed.
I appealed it. Yeah. So one time I did write a long letter, and I was like, I don't feel like you're being fair to people who are going through this solo. If you look at my fertilization rates, they are low, but they came back and they were like, nope, because you're using donor sperm, we will not cover ICSI. So my first round of IVF, I was trying to save money. So I didn't do PGT testing, and I didn't do ICSI because they were going to be individually like $3,000, $5,000 more dollars that I did not have. So when all was said and done with that first round, and I felt like, again, there's no reason. I had plenty of follicles. Everything was like maturing right. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I will say that when all was said and done, I had 1 embryo. And so I transferred that, and I was pregnant, and almost the same exact thing happened. The 6-week ultrasound had a heartbeat. It was a little bit lower. The heart rate was a little lower. So from that first ultrasound, something wasn't quite right. And I think I was kind of like numb at that point. I'm like, here we go again. Here we go again. So that ended up being my second miscarriage. And at that point, I was like, something has to change. So I knew there was another doctor in the practice at the time, and I wanted to switch to the other doctor. But being like someone who didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, I didn't know how you went about that. And I didn't know, like, oh my gosh, is my first doctor going to find out and be mad at me and not want to talk to me if she sees me? Like, what's going to happen? How do you do this? And I asked one of the nurses there were lovely. And like, they end up being like, you're like, oh, hey, so-and-so, when you answer the phone, I don't even, because I know who it's going to be every time. And she was like, Alison, people do this all the time. You just call the office and you say you're switching. Like the end, because I built so many feelings around this.
Yes.
Like,
and I think we build it up more than they're used to it. Yeah. I really think they're used to it. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, no, this happens all the time. You just call and say this. And that's all I needed. I was like, okay, then that's what I'll do. And so I switched and did a second round of IVF. And then I was like, you know what? I'm paying for ICSI. We're doing this. We're doing this because I can't emotionally handle this anymore. I can't do one more miscarriage. My heart can't. Time was also ticking. So I talked to my mom about it, and she's like, we'll help you, but you can't. Like, she couldn't see me so sad anymore. And she just was like, I want to do something to help you, and this is how we can help you. So we went ahead and did another. So it was a slightly different protocol, different doctor. With ICSI, I was able to get 5 embryos, sent them for PGT testing. 2 came back normal. And according to the doctor at the time, the embryos were identical. He's like, everything about them is the exact same. So, because originally I was like, well, just pick the best one. Don't tell me. I didn't want to know. I didn't care about gender. I just needed this to work. And so that's how I got my son. I got him from that PGT tested normal embryo that I didn't find out until the minute he was born. And I guess I'll say that my pregnancy was lovely. Like maybe the
Good.
stars aligned and all the crap I went through getting to that point, everything was perfect. Everything was great. I felt great. I just was so happy. I was so happy the entire time. And I didn't want to find out. And my plan was that um when I had him, I told all the nurses, like, I want to be the one that says what it is. Nobody in here gets to say
Oh,
what
I
this
love
baby is,
that.
but me. I want you
I
to hold
love
it.
that.
I want you to hold it up and I'm shouting what it is because I worked
Oh, I
really hard
love
for this.
that.
And so it
Yes.
was the best. I mean, the delivery, and he ended up being breech. And then I had an induction, and then I had like a labor that I got to 5 centimeters and had to have an emergency C-section. So all of that was wild and not ideal. But um, in the operating room, I was able to say it was a boy, and so
I
that
love it.
was wonderful. And honestly, like I couldn't have someone that is more like me in every way. Everything I was worried about, I was worried that he wasn't going to look like me, and we're twins. And his personality is, for better, for worse, my personality. And um, he's just like, seriously, the best thing I've ever done. The best thing I've ever done. The hardest thing I've ever done, but the best thing that's happened to me. And even, since then, around around the time he was 3, preschool comes, and 3-year-olds ask a lot of questions, and it wasn't as much him as it was his friends at first that would come running up to me at pickup. Does he have a daddy? Does he have a daddy? Does he have a daddy? And like, but like the same question, like on repeat. And I was like, oh,
You're
like,
like, kid, you're a nightmare.
I was
You're
like,
my nightmare come true right
it
now.
really was. I was dreading this minute, and it was from the other kids. I always, explained it as, our family is 2 of us. It's mommy and me, and he knows he doesn't have a dad. But that those 3 and 4-year-old years was a lot of questions. One day I picked him up from school. We were driving home, and out of nowhere in the back seat, usually these conversations happen in the car, right? Like it's where they
What
do
is
their
it
deep
about the
thinking
car? It's like a
I
from the
love it
back
though.
seat.
it's like a
Because then
traveling
you don't have to have that
confessional.
awkward eye
I
contact.
know it's
I
true.
I
really
I
asked
like
think
it.
her
that's
that.
why the kids
That's
like it too. Because
Well,
it's
and
like,
I also appreciate that he couldn't see my face some of the times that I'm like
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
crying.
yeah.
And he said, how come I don't have a dad? And I was like, holy crap, like here it is. Like it's here. And and I also realized, like how I said before, I'm always gonna hope that I'm like, things are gonna always be in the back of my head doing this by myself. And one is like, my God, like I pray that he doesn't wake up one day and say, like, you shouldn't have ever done this. Like it's one of my biggest fears, I think I'll always
Mm-hmm.
have, is to have a
Mm-hmm.
son or have a child who says, why did you do this alone? Like, why didn't I don't have a dad. Like I never wanted him to feel, and I never will want him to feel less than, I think, which is always going to put that extra pressure on me. I don't want him to feel like he's missing out on something. So I try so hard. I think I posted it on the Facebook, like, single mothers by choice group that I'm in. This feeling that like cut deep into my soul, like, oh my God, did I do something wrong by doing this alone? Am I depriving him of something? Does he feel like he doesn't have everything that his friends have? And someone worded it in a way like, no, it's human nature to always wish you had something, right? And for all of us, it's different. And this like really helped my heart. Um what I found out, and it took me a couple days to be able to ask him, but if you had a dad, what is it that you would want to do with this dad? And he said, well, I want him to pick me up from school. And that's all it was. And that's all it was. His friends in preschool sometimes have their dads that pick them up. And he just was wanting somebody different to pick him up for a time or two. And it wasn't as deep as I was making it.
I just love that. I mean, and I love that you got to that point. You filtered your own emotion, which is totally understandable. And like you parented with such intention. You went through so much to become a parent that is such a beautiful thing also. And it's such a beautiful pairing, the two of you too.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there are times like, before bed, I can say to him in honesty, like, I wanted you so much,
Yeah.
so much. My heart wanted you so much that I found a way to get you. And I, will always say, I'm so thankful that the doctors could help me. I'm so thankful that a donor could help me. But my heart was missing a piece, and it was you. And sometimes he'll say, Mommy, you picked the very best one. I said, I did pick the one that was just right for me. And he'll say, like, I really
This
did.
is this is going to be my first time crying on the podcast. I love that
I
so
That is the
much.
best way to describe it ever. Oh,
Yeah, like I did. And I always say, I did. I did pick the very best one.
So, I mean, were there any particular supports that were helpful to you along the way? Well, you mentioned some of them,
Mhm.
but I think any particular resources you'd suggest to others?
Definitely, stumbling upon you, the world of infertility, being able to like find people who have, you know, gone down that road, being able to follow accounts on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. So yeah, support groups, people who I've never actually met in person, people who I've only been friends with via the internet, other solo parents. I joined the Boston area single moms by choice group. I know they meet up a lot. I haven't been able to do any of those meetups yet, but like that's an option, is to get together with people. For me, it was just getting knowledge, finding as many support groups as I could find, finding information, asking questions, knowing the questions I could ask, or kind of being the squeaky wheel and asking my nurse, because I didn't get to talk to the doctor that often, but I did always get to talk to the nurses and be like, well, is there any other choices here? Are there any other options here? And just asking people about their stories. Support groups, are amazing. They're amazing.
we happen to agree.
Yes. I
it's
don't know if you
it's so
know of
great
any.
that that now you're able to pay it forward in
Yeah.
those, those same groups, and be that person
Mhm.
for so many. Is there anything that you'd want to share about your journey that we haven't asked about yet?
I didn't do the very end, which was that second embryo at the when I got two, one that was my son, and the second one that the doctor said was like identical. After I had my son, it was in the back of my mind every day. Like, there's one more. There's one more. I can't leave it behind. It's the exact same. So in my heart, I was like, it's a boy that looks just like this, and I can't stop thinking about it. I need to transfer it. And right, the same kind of situation. Like, all the testing was fine. Gosh, how old was he? I want to say maybe he was two. My son was two. So that was harder because all the monitoring appointments at fertility clinics, you can't bring a kid in here for a lot of reasons. And I understand what those reasons are, but I was like, also, it's 6:30 in the morning. What am I going to do with my 2-year-old? And one of my really good friends came, her or her husband would drive and sit in the parking lot with my kid in the car in the dark because it's 6:30 in the morning, while I ran in to get blood drawn or to get an ultrasound because I couldn't bring him with me. So the embryo was perfect. It implanted. I was pregnant. And then I went for the 8-week ultrasound, and it was something I had never experienced before. It was a blighted ovum, which was all my pregnancy hormones were growing, increasing, and there was no sac and no baby. And that was like a different kind of hurt. So, it's just a different hurt that I hadn't experienced before, because I was really wondering what was wrong with me in that sense, because I did this before and it worked before, and it was like the same exact grade embryo, and what was wrong with me. And then the guilt of that I still live with to this day. And I've said this to you, Kate, my son's 5.5, and that very last miscarriage was um 2.5, 3 years ago now, and it stings every day because I just want to say I'm sorry. I tried. There'll be times to this day where he's like, Mom, can you have a baby? Can you have another baby? And I have to be honest, and I have to say, I really wanted another baby. I tried really hard. I said, but it just didn't work. I said, sometimes babies grow and sometimes they don't. And it just didn't work. And so that's when he kind of will circle back to, like, you really did pick the very best one. Because that's when, like, his really, like, how in the world did you work, right? When everything else didn't work, how in the world did he work? And I have to sometimes put myself back to that mindset, because it's so easy for me to have, the pity party of what's wrong with me, the sadness that I feel for myself and now for my child who should have, and my therapist gets mad at me for saying should have, but I say it and she gets mad. Like, you should have had a brother. We had this. And then so I feel bad.
I hear you, but I want to just like take it away. Like I want
Right.
to throw it away, but you can't. I mean, that's the thing. Obviously, we say all the time, like you have to feel your feelings and those are your
Yeah.
feelings. But I just wish we could take them away because obviously it was not your fault. And
Right.
it just sucks. It's
It just
unfair.
sucks.
Yeah. Well, I know he does. And I mean, again, just my personal experience, it was helpful when my child started to be glad we were not, that she didn't have siblings. That helped me because it used to pierce my heart when she would say, like, I want a sibling. I would be like, I tried, but I just can't do it.
Yeah.
So, well, I know we could talk to you, well, forever.
For
But we have two questions we ask all of our guests. So we do have to get to those. So one is which I feel like you already gave, which was excellent, but
Mhm.
maybe you'll say something different. But what is a piece of advice you would give to someone just starting out to try to grow their family or who's struggling to grow their family? And then sort of the opposite of that is, what do you wish no one would ever say again to someone trying to grow their family?
Be your best advocate. Advocate for yourself. Make phone calls, do Google searches, get multiple opinions, talk to as many people as you can, ask questions, right? So sometimes people don't come out and tell you what's happened to them, but a couple, like, you know, thoughtfully worded questions can get you right there and can get you a lot of information. And I think asking opens up the door to anyone who's ever experienced any type of struggle growing their family, to give you a wealth of information and expertise and support. So that's what I would say. I would tell somebody who is just starting, and people want to help you. There's so much out there. Let people help you, because by no means should you do this alone. Um, and everybody's journey is so different. So keeping that in mind, what worked for someone isn't going to necessarily work for you, but you're just filling, your cup with all of this knowledge. And I think extra knowledge is never going to hurt. Something I wish that people would never say. People have told me through this whole journey of how strong I am, and I think when enough people tell you you're a strong person, you kind of feel like, well, then I'm going to have to be strong and not be anything else. And I think you can be strong and you can be vulnerable and you can be emotional and you can be raw and authentic and true. I didn't want to always be strong. Yes, what I was doing by nature alone was something you have to be strong for, but I just wanted to sit on the couch and cry to someone. And I wanted that opportunity to do that. but I will forever be grateful to the people who had, had miscarriages that are in my life and that had reached out and supported me.
Yes, that's so important. You can't tell someone how they're
Yeah.
supposed to be or feel. And if you're assigning like this label, like you are the strong one, that doesn't give you room to express all the other feelings that you're having. It's
Mhm.
so limiting, and it's doing everyone in that relationship a disservice.
Yeah. I've like, I think this whole, path journey and that I'm still on, you have to be able to do this, especially solo. You have to really be in tune with yourself, right? Your strengths, your weaknesses. And I'm honest. I have to like pour it all out there. A friend of mine just reached out to me the other, you know, the other day because we had ran into each other, and she said, she's like, is something seem just off? Are you okay? Like, is everything all right? And I was like, I just had one of those days. I would brought my son to hockey, and we were in the rink, and all I could see is families, moms and dads and siblings, and bringing their kid to hockey. And I just was like, I had to get out of there. Like I sometimes it was just like too much in my face. I wasn't in the right headspace. I know I was overtired. I know we had been traveling after Thanksgiving, and I was like, thank you so much. Like, no, I'm not okay. Sometimes I just kind of get like in this funk where like, ugh, this isn't fair. This isn't what I planned. This isn't the path that I, grew up being like, I can't wait to grow up and have kids all by myself. It's not what I thought, my plan would be. Um, it's not to say, and I say this all the time, it's not to say that I can't meet someone tomorrow and have that in my future, but it's just there's some grief to that. There's some grief to thinking like this isn't how I envisioned my adulthood to be, and it certainly wasn't how I envisioned my path to having children. Um, and some days I just want to sit in that and just be like, well, this sucks. Most days it doesn't, but some days it just does. And I, kind of back to like always having to be strong. Like, no, some days I just want to be like, this isn't fair. And I want to be able to say it. And I want people to be able to be like, you know what, you're right. And it's not that I always want people to say, I don't know how you do this, Alison. Like, but honestly, I appreciate it. I appreciate when people are saying, listen, I was trying to make dinner, my kid's screaming at my feet. And all I could think to myself is, Allison does this every day. I can make dinner with my kids screaming at me, when I'm home alone because Allison does this every day. And there's something about that like, I was like, yeah, like I kind of want those video clips like up somewhere or in my brain because I do appreciate people stopping to say that because the times when I'm having, a really hard time or I'm feeling down on myself or I'm feeling kind of shitty about being alone is when I use those.
I I can bet that that's really validating. It's
Yeah,
again,
it feels
not
good.
somebody being like, "Oh, you're so strong," but somebody recognizing like, "No, this is hard work.
Hard.
What
Mhm.
you're doing is hard, and yes, you are strong, but you are also all of these other things that go into it."
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Allison. Like Kate said, we could talk to you forever, but thank you for sharing your story and your beautiful family with us.
Thank you.
And if anyone listening is exploring solo parenting, please don't hesitate to reach out so we can help connect you with some of the resources that Allison was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love it. If anybody comes along and wants somebody to talk to, I'm always here.
Appreciate that
That's
so much. Appreciate you.
very nice of
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you both.
Thank you.
You. We hope you'll join us next time for more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at All Paths FB or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, for more information about our work. All Paths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support who are vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone struggling to grow their families. Today, we want to give a special thank you to our bronze sponsor, Boston IVF. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. It's an honor to walk with you on your family building journey.